Welcome to Surrender School.
We are talking about 3-minute shares, and what specifically we're talking about right now are the assignment that you had, where we had kind of all these different type challenges. This is the weekly challenge that I talk about here. And that is if you have taken a test or you've kind of watched the video and said, that is what I'm like. What I want to talk about now is did you try to do this? First of all, did you learn anything about yourself? If you're a self-pres 4, the assignment, right, the one that you would pick is use your tenacity to work a seriously difficult program like ACA by the Loving Parent Guidebook to become your own, to learn to become your own loving parent. Your spirituality would explode doing this. And I want to do a shout out right now. I do not belong to ACA, but I see such changes in my friends and people that I know that go to that. And I want to talk about the self-pres instinct and why I chose this for type 4 and why I chose this specifically for the self-pres. And that's because because we are uh, human beings, but and also animals, we are fiercely protective in a weird way of our parents. So even if they were shit parents, we are still in a weird way fiercely protective of them. And so anytime that we sense that I am going to have like this fear that somebody's going to tell me I have to hate my parents. I don't want to hate my parents. I love my parents, right? And so what happens, the reason I picked this is because if you can get past that and just do that, that the key to being able to love and accept your parents is the only way out is through. You've got to go through that. And that's why for this self-pres person, because that self-preservation, part of your identity is to identify your parents however you have identified them. And now I'm asking you to like let that free, let that go and realize that they were human, doing the best that they could, even if it was shit, right? Okay. And then once you get through that, you can truly love your parents and accept them the way that they are and accept that that became such a part of you. It had to be part of you. So that's why I chose that for that. I think of all the ones that are out there, that's the hardest one to me. That it delights me to watch the 4s do this work, right? And every one of these, by the way, it should, if you are that type, and especially that subtype, this should be hard for you. If you're just like, that was easy, then either no, it's possible that I've missed because I do miss, but a lot of them, it's like I'm just going with an instinct as a somebody that's been an adult trainer for my entire life since I was an adult, right? I just kind of am, but these are still guesses, so I could be wrong. Your Enneagram type also helps determine. So you talked about birth order and those kinds of things. Enneagram type is like the thing that underlies kind of all of that. I want to read something, the social 2 exercise that I did. So all of the 2s here, just imagine if this is hard for you. For a week, every time you notice yourself wanting to give, pause and ask yourself, what am I hoping for? Okay. The sexual, this is the one that I'm really interested in. This week, if you're having a down day, tell a friend that you're not. Try not smiling when you are down or nervous or uncomfortable. The people that smile, even when they're uncomfortable, smile even when they're upset, those are 2s. Almost 100% of the time, those are 2s. We've all known them in our lifetime. It doesn't mean all 2s are that way, by the way, but 2s are pretty much the only ones that will literally smile when they're I mean, there's absolutely no reason in that moment for them to be smiling, but they will smile. And it's just fascinating, I think, to see that in people. So now what I want to talk about is the step. Admitted to God, to ourselves, and another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. And I did cover the things that I thought were, hold on a second, that I thought were the reason that we couldn't, um, that we had trouble with this step. And one of the things I realized, by the way, is I talked to Joy about this morning. It's like I realized that I have a very, I'll call it distinctive, I don't know how unique, but certainly distinctive view of the way the program should be worked once you've been through it the first time. The first time, big book, absolutely, we're on our knees, it busts our balls, it's supposed to, I get all that. But hanging around the rooms and staying for a long time, and I don't know if anybody else experienced this, but it really it ended up beating me up badly over and over and over again. And I'm very tenacious, so I just kept getting beaten up. And so one of the things that I realized is I really wanted to share my view of the way the program should be worked. Once you've been through it the first time and really, really dug in and worked it, then after that, what do we do? And what's interesting is I'm finding so many places that people have suffered the same thing that I'm talking about and solved it in different ways, right? You talk to Michael Naylor, just listening to him, right? Once again, he's in recovery. Herb K, Alan Berger, Patrick, right? All these people have kind of arrived at a similar place and have solved it in a slightly different, in some case, dramatically different way. That internal family systems thing, all of it. So I'm excited because even though I always view kind of my view of this as very unique, I'm not sure it's as unique as I thought it was. But my wanting to do this class is because what freed me from that prison of that being beaten up all the time was the Enneagram. But there's so many other things that could do that as well. So anyway, I think that's cool. All right, so let's talk for a real quick about what possibly makes step 5 difficult for the type. I'm going to go through this and then we're going to share again if anybody has a share on if this is true or not true, because I'm also always trying to learn more about the different types. Okay, for the type 1, searching for the perfect person to share this with. Remember last week they were looking for the perfect inventory style. Now they're looking for the perfect person to share that with. And that's what ones do. They look for perfection. The 2, they don't see anything wrong with the pattern, so they're not sure how to share it. But they're also the ones that are completely surprised when people are mad at them. Why are you mad at me? All I am is helpful, right? That's the 2. Okay, for the 3, they don't go very deep. So and they watch all these other people going deep, and they don't even know how to or why they would. The 4, they're stuck in. They sometimes can get stuck in step 4, and I think Melissa, that is tied in a way to why you talked about the year, right? Is because 4s have to be very careful because even though they don't love it, there also is there it sometimes can be in love with their suffering, right? They hate it and love it, right? It's that little bit of something because they feel so comfortable in melancholy. I just think it's that 4s are fascinating to me. I have no line at all to the 4 or the 6 or the 3. And so those are 100% observed by me. And I go, oh, okay, I get it. Maybe I don't, but I feel sometimes I could do. For the 5, 5s are very private people. Usually they don't like to share stuff about themselves with anyone. They love to share knowledge. So Judy, that's why Mark, right? He was great as an Oracle support person, right? It's like because he wanted to share that knowledge. He learned all this stuff and knew how to help people, right? So that, and they love to do that. But right, if somebody wanted to know personal stuff about him, they're not going to share that, right? Okay, so for the 6, the 6s are afraid of what will happen if they share, right? And I think Trisha earlier today you were talking about right this idea of who do I trust or not trust, and right, and trust is a really big thing there because 6s are fiercely loyal to trusted authority. That's why so important for a 6 to have a higher power that they can trust, a greater power that they can trust, that they absolutely practice. That's the spiritual practice for the 6 is to basically figure out what is the facet of the higher power that I can absolutely trust, because that is what frees you, right? Because then you're not afraid of what will happen. Okay, in this case, right, you're having to trust a person because you're also sharing it with the person. So sometimes they will delay because they really want to be sure that they can find someone that they can completely trust. For the 7, they just want to make it quick and painless. So just the 3 and the 7 usually have relatively shallow step 5s, which is kind of cool because there's nothing wrong with a shallow step 5, provided what you're looking at are those patterns, right? If you can figure out that thread that keeps showing up in your life, what's that thread that has you stepping on people's toes? What's that thread that's causing the pain for you and other people? For the eight, they want to set the parameters of the engagement. So always, it's always a control issue with the eights. And then for nine, they will decide to do it and then talk themselves out of it, decide to do it, talk themselves out of it. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing. And I would love to have comments on, is this true or was it different than that for you? I just
Thank
heard,
you.
I saw a meme the other day and I really liked it. And it said, after men, I'll share this with you. It says, after menopause, women will sometimes gain like 30 pounds. And women who gain 30 pounds after menopause actually live longer than the husbands who mention it. Is that the best? I thought that was funny. Okay. So the topic that you're bringing up, stuck on step four, right? And sometimes it's stuck just because, once again, we have blind spots. So it's really hard for us. And remember, the purpose of step four, in my opinion, the purpose of step four is for us to be able to find the thread that basically goes through everything that we do. It's to help us see those blind spots and understand the thread. And then it lets us, in step five, be able to share, here is the nature of what is causing all of my suffering. A lot of times, what will happen is people will think that step four is to get everything off their chest, and step five is to share everything with this other person. And I personally don't believe that's the case, because I don't think everything is ever done all at once, right? My sponsor from the very beginning said, okay, this is like a room full of cobwebs. We're going to blast through the center, the big stuff that you've seen. That's what we're going to work on. And then we go back later and get all the stuff out of the corners. But it isn't everything under the sun. It's the stuff that's coming up. That's why we continue to stay in program, to continue to work those things. So I think sometimes the stuck, and this would tells you a bit about yourself, Enneagram type as well, is to ask yourself, okay, obviously I'm stuck on four because there's a fear here that I'm not looking at. What am I afraid of? What do I think four is going to tell me that I don't want to know? Right. And that's almost like the real question, because what you might be, some people would be afraid of five. Right. So in other words, a type five might get stuck in step four because they're afraid of step five, because once they're done with that, they have to share it with someone. I have to share this shit with someone. I don't want to share it, right? So the fear may not even be about four. It might be about five. That's relatively rare, but it might be that. And it might be that you have to take a look at your, whatever. So that's what I would journal on if I were you, is what am I afraid of that's keeping me stuck in step four? What is that fear? And just write like everything that you're afraid of from it and see what resonates there. And that may also help narrow down the type that you are. To me, there is a difference between guilt and shame. And I think guilt is like a momentary thing that says, oops, shouldn't have done that. That's guilt. Guilt isn't intended to carry on forever, right? So then what happens is it turns into shame, and then it gets, down deep inside, right? And it's just like when I talked about the difference between fear and anxiety, right? Fear is a physical response. Fear is, there's a bear that just jumped in front of you, and all this physical chemical stuff happens in your system. Anxiety is when it isn't that, there is no bear, but your body still reacts like that. So sixes have that. And what fours have is shame, kind of the same way. So there's this guilt, and it's like that, whatever those feelings, because there's chemicals that are happening, whatever that feeling, when I feel, oh, I shouldn't have done that, but then it hangs out just right. So you have that same physical reaction that you had, that is guilt, but it's for long-term shame. That is very unhealthy. And that is something, and it's just something, this is going to sound bitchy and I don't mean it to, completely unnecessary, right? That is the work. That is the holy work of the four, is to be able to separate the guilt and shame and understand guilt was then. Have I paid for that? And you know what? Maybe a better thing to say is, I have paid for that. I made my amends. I've asked for forgiveness for myself and from my higher power. That is done. Then you ask yourself, is there a reason for shame? Because really, shame long term says I am defective, as opposed to I did something that was wrong or ill advised or whatever that is. And so, right. And so it's the dragging it into today. And this sounds very insensitive of me, and I'm not trying to be, because I really am just, I don't have a path to the four, no arrows or anything. Four is the furthest from me than almost anything is, right? So this is me observing it and saying, could you try doing this? And it might be ridiculous what I'm saying. I don't know. That's just not, like I said, I don't even have an arrow to a four. So if I am ever blessed to be able to incorporate all the types, four will be the last one I do because it's the furthest from me, right? I have no link to four at all. Okay, Bill W. talks about this too, because he was a four, absolutely. And he carried all this guilt, depression, all this stuff with him, but he knew that there was a better answer, right? He knew that. If you ever get a chance to read The Soul of Sponsorship, which is the letters between him and Father Dowling, who he considered his sponsor, who was a compulsive eater, not an alcoholic. Anyway, if you get a chance to read Soul of Sponsorship, you can see just that Bill knows there needs to be something more. He just doesn't know what it is because he's not, I mean, he knows a little bit about different things, but he doesn't know what it is. That's why Ellen Berger's emotional sobriety is so important, because that is the next frontier, is the emotional sobriety. And that's coming about right now because we have the time and effort and energy to be able to work on that. But the idea is you don't go searching for these things, right? They'll crop up when you're supposed to deal with them. We all have shit from our past but they'll jump up and they'll become part of what you need to deal with at the time. So we live clean, so we're not creating new things that we owe amends for. And what will happen if we're living clean, seeking God, so 10, 11, and 12, live clean, seek God, help others. If you're doing that, what will happen is the things that you need to deal with will crop up. They will pop up and go, oh, I probably need to deal with that. There was a kid in high school that then I need to reach out and make an amends to that person, right? High school, we don't remember that. And I'll tell you that 8, 9, and 1, the past is not super alive. So when those crop up, it's like, well, that's interesting. I haven't thought about that in 30 years, right? So, but that's what will happen. So rather than seeking that, and once again, I think that's part of it when I talk about we have work that we do, and then there's work that our higher power does. The work that we're doing is living clean, seeking God, right? We do a spiritual practice, we live clean so that we don't owe an amends, and we help other people. If we are doing that, those things will automatically happen to help us grow. They just will, and we don't have to seek them at all. But I want to talk about this real quick and go over each of these, because this really, because it's a summary, if you can go, oh, yeah, I am like that, then it's just one more underline that says, yes, that is me. Okay, so first, let me do this here real quick. Yes, there we go. Okay, so first let's start with the one. Okay, he calls it Michael Naylor calls it the gentle mystic, the pleasant, self-effacing type, receptive, reassuring, complacent, resigned. Does that feel, once again, this is like the true self, okay? The reformer, they're rational, idealistic type, principled, purposeful, self-controlled, and perfectionistic. The 2 is the intuitive healer, right? They're the caring, interpersonal type. They're generous, demonstrative, people-pleasing, and possessive. The achiever is the inspiring champion. They are success-oriented. They're efficient. They're adaptable, excelling, driven, and image-conscious. The individualist or the creative alchemist is the 4. The sensitive, introspective type. They're expressive, dramatic, self-absorbed, and temperamental. The investigator or the 5 is the kind wizard. They are intense, cerebral type. They're perceptive, innovative, secretive, and isolated. The 6 is the loyalist, and the true self is the courageous pathfinder. The committed, security-oriented type. They're engaging, responsible, anxious, and suspicious. The 7 is the enthusiast or the joyful visionary, the excitable, variety-seeking type. They're spontaneous, versatile, acquisitive, and scattered. Potentially could be. The 8 is the challenger, the lion-hearted protector, the powerful, dominating type. They are self-confident, decisive, willful, and confrontational. Okay, and then the 9, we're back to the gentle mystic, the pleasant, self-effacing, and so forth. All right. Right, the 8 gets in your face, right? And I will say one of the reasons I know that one of the reasons I have the attitude about steps 4 and 5 that I do is because if you live in steps 4 and 5, it is painful. If you live in 1, 2, and 3, and especially columns 1 and 2 of step 4, it is hell to live there. And eventually you will leave program because you can't do that. And the way that I look at it is before I came to program, nothing was my fault. And then I came to program, and even Hiroshima was my fault. Everything was my fault when I lived in 4 and 5. So eventually, what has to happen is I work through the other steps and I get clean. I leave that shit in the past and I live clean as much as I can. And just, I think what we were talking about a few minutes ago, with Carmen, I think I said to you, right? It's like, what will things from the past will crop up at the right time for me to deal with it, because God, my higher power, brings those things to my attention when I can handle them and not before I can handle them. At least when I'm working a program and spiritually fit, that maintenance of my spiritual condition is the answer to all of it. If I, and I lately, I have been neglecting it like hell, which is, I think, the reason I woke up this morning with the belief that my presence doesn't matter, right? Which is so foreign for an 8, right? Thank you, 9s, for giving me that. No, that's what it feels like. That's just what I needed. So much, some of what we need, some of what we do learn is what is ours and what is not ours, right? Because a lot of the times what will happen is an 8, right? The whole fucking world belongs to me and I get to choose. No, you don't, Cheryl. That isn't the way it works. So I think so often it's sometimes something like that. But I also think, and I believe this with all my heart. We come to the 12-step program and we hear the words happy, joyous, and free, and we want that. But freedom comes first before happy and joyous. Not in the sentence, but in life. So if you can be free of these things, then you can have happiness and you can have joy. But you don't get the happiness and joy until you get the freedom. Because your ego structure says, I need to do that to survive. It was built to protect you. Absolutely.